that my neighbor's goods, if I desire them moderately and I desire to acquire them for myself through just means, then this is not envy. If I am saddened by my neighbor's good, I treat my neighbor poorly because of this negative feeling I have that I'm threatened by his greater talents, or that he's approximating my abilities, or that he has goods that I would like to have, and I'm angry that he has them and I don't. He got the promotion, I didn't. This is the sin of envy. And it's a very, very all-pervasive, dangerous, and real sickness in a person's life. It's a sin against charity for my love. If I love God, then I have to be loving my neighbor. And if I love my neighbor, I want good for my neighbor. And these goods, I should praise God and be grateful to God. It's a sin against gratitude, and I'm not grateful to God for the good that he's doing for my brother, my sister. Rather, I am becoming angered by it. It springs from vainglory, as I mentioned, because of my insecurity with myself. It's a lack of humility which causes me to be susceptible to the sin of envy. It is directly against the 10th commandment. When we were treating our 10 commandments in our catechetical series, the 10th commandment, coveting my neighbor's goods, anything that belongs to my neighbor, being forbidden to do that, envy is condemned by the 10th commandment. And it's self-inflicted. It's something, some say it's the poison that I drink, hoping that you'll die from it. So I punish myself with my resentment and the rancor and the envy, so that hoping that you might die from it. It's a self-pity that's self-inflicted, and of course very displeasing to God and very offensive to God. Envy in the Bible, we hear it in Deuteronomy chapter 5, Exodus 20, in the giving of the law on Mount Horeb, the covenant by the 10th commandment. It's forbidden by the 10th commandment. It is in the book of Job, as we already cited with regard to anger. Surely anger kills the fool. Jealousy, envy slays the simple. It kills. In Galatians, in chapter 5, verse 26, in speaking after the fruits of the flesh and the fruits of the Spirit, we hear Paul give the command, let us have no self-conceit, no provoking of one another, no envy of one another. So it's condemned in the Scriptures. Who is normally the object of our envy? It's not someone that we don't know about that we read in the newspaper. There's normally a personal relationship, and because it springs from vainglory, there's a certain competitiveness. And this is something in our culture that we push, this competitiveness and success and comparing to one another, which is a lack of humility. Humility, I compare myself to no one but to God alone. I don't know what my brother's being asked by God to do. I don't know the gifts and the graces that he's given, and I'm not so sure of the ones he's given me, so there's no ability to compare. I have to look to Christ, and that's where humility lies, and we lack it, so we suffer from envy. Man normally envies one who is near to him, or whom he is striving to rival, or to surpass. St. Gregory the Great says, we can envy only those whom we think better in some respect than ourselves. These are the ones. And so fellow workers in the vineyard, among priests, to priests, religious, maybe in the parish, maybe at work, maybe in the soccer and sports and competitiveness, but those that we're close to. And the devil will use this to break up families, to break up marriages, to break up, to divide and conquer, which is his tactic. Diabolic means to throw a wrench in the machine. It means to break up, to cut into or to cut through. What are its ill effects? Hatred, detraction, repeating evils of my brother that somebody doesn't have a right to know, calumny, lying about, exaggerating about the evils, having joy in another's misfortune, strife, causing this readiness to fight, looking for a fight, quarreling, deeds, slamming the door, setting things up, not helping, either by action or omission, coming from my envy. Ill will, that I will bad. And of course, St. Thomas says we judge according to our biases, our dispositions. Because I have this disposition of envy, I'll never utilize the person's gifts because I'm in competition with this person through envy. Bitterness, erroneous judgments. I won't see reality for what it is because of my mindset. I become a child of Satan. I become a tool in Satan's hand, that Satan will use me if I'm envious. And from within the church, we have this problem with good, zealous people who become envious. Now, what do I do to get rid of this? Well, it's very difficult. Of all the capital sins, it may be the most difficult to shake. Envy is all pervasive. It's down in our marrow of our bones, as sin is. And it takes a lot of diligence, a lot of work, and a lot of God's grace that we cooperate with to get rid of. Number one, bring it to light. It's an embarrassing sin. It's like lust. Lusting after a woman, after a man in your mind and imaginations. It's a very sick sin, very embarrassing. Bring it to confession. Bring it into the light. The Catechism of the Catholic Church at number 1456 says, all mortal sins of which penitents, after diligent self-examination, are conscious of, must be recounted by them in confession, even if they are most secret and have been committed against the last two precepts of the Decalogue, 9th and 10th commandments, and the 10th has to do with envy. For these sins sometimes wound the soul more grievously and are more dangerous than those which are committed openly. Very important statement of the Catechism, that my envy can kill me and get me to hell sometimes quicker than actual actions. Practice goodwill to the one I'm feeling these negative thoughts to. Praise them, tell them, congratulate them on good things done, mention their good deeds to other people against these feelings that we have. Practice humility, humble and fervent prayer, and use of the sacraments. These will all help us with all the capital sins, but particularly with this sin of envy. Next time, let's do a little introduction to the upcoming Year of Faith.
Coming up next, in a conversation with Bishop Michael Jarrell, Monsignor Richard Green interviews Bishop Jarrell about the church and politics.
Good morning and welcome to another conversation with the Bishop of Lafayette, Bishop Michael Jarrell. Bishop, thanks for working us into your schedule.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and with all in our viewing audience as well.
Last week, we discussed a letter by Bishop Jules Jomard, the first bishop, written in 1951. It was about the duty to vote and other principles regarding politics. This letter will be printed in, Bishop, your Acadiana Catholic column in August, and will also be available on the diocesan website, www.diolaf.org. And so, for years now, the diocese bishop has had a policy on political responsibilities in the church. What's the purpose of this policy?
Okay, well, first let me say that our whole policy manual for the diocese is available online at the same website that you just gave. So we invite people to visit and look through our policy manual. Everything we'll talk about today is in that policy manual. But the main purpose of this particular policy on political responsibilities in the church is to give guidance to our clergy, our priests and deacons. This policy is not primarily for lay people. It is for our priests and deacons. And it really gets into a whole list of do's and don'ts.
Okay. And which would you want to start with first, the do's or the don'ts?
Well, let me begin by stating the policy, which is very brief, and I'll quote, "The church is to address issues, avoiding partisan politics and the endorsement of or opposition to individual candidates for public office or political parties." And then that brief statement is followed by a list of don'ts. So we can go into that today. For example, the first is concerning priests and deacons who visit the state capitol in order to talk to legislators. Now, we do encourage them to do this, but we want them first to check with the executive director of the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. He and his assistant are our men on the Capitol Hill there in Baton Rouge, and we try to coordinate our activities so they're not getting one message from the bishops and one from this or that priest or deacon. So we simply ask them to coordinate their activities with our director.
What else, Bishop, should not be done?
We do have some regulations with regard to church facilities, and that would be at the parish or the school or facilities owned by certain church groups like the Knights of Columbus. First of all, they are not to be used by candidates or political advertisements. We try to stay away from those type of activities. And especially the pulpit should never be turned over to candidates for public office. Even after Mass or outside of Mass, we try to stay away from those individual endorsements. We did have a case a few years ago where one candidate who was a parishioner wanted to do a television ad, and he had a few shots of him in the church, in his parish church. Well, he was well-intentioned, of course, and didn't mean any harm, but we certainly don't allow that. Now, outside, you can't control pictures of outside. If a candidate wants to be standing in front of his church and the picture is from the sidewalk or the street, well, we have no say-so. But we do not lend our facilities for partisan activities.
Bishop, sometimes there are groups that want to distribute sample ballots, for example, with recommendations on which candidates should be supported. Is this permissible?
No, it is not permissible to do sample ballots, because sample ballots typically are in favor of one candidate or a party's candidates. Also, we don't allow people to put flyers on cars during Sunday Mass. Now, sometimes they do it without permission, but it is not allowed. And the same with billboards on church property. We don't allow that either.
Now, Bishop, what about so-called voter education guides?
Well, voter education guides are instruments, papers, that list all the candidates and their position on certain issues. Theoretically, it would be permissible, but it's very tricky. It's very difficult to do it where it would not be seen as slanted, and then it becomes a matter of interpretation. I know that some years ago the bishops of the state tried to do this, and it became so complicated and so tricky that we just gave it up. So it's not recommended.
Okay. Bishop, there's something about parishes and schools recognizing or giving honors to those who speak and act in defiance of our fundamental moral values and principles. So what about that?
Yes, this has become a national issue, and in 2004, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops gave guidelines saying that Catholic groups should not give public recognition to those candidates who have positions in opposition to our core values, like respect for human life, for example. So, no, we don't allow that.
We've been talking about diocesan policy. Are there any laws concerning church involvement in politics?
Well, not really. These are not matters of law, but there are IRS rules, Internal Revenue Service, where a 501c3 organization could lose its tax-exempt status if they engage in these activities.
Isn't this a restriction on the church?
Yes, it is, but I've found that it's not too burdensome. First of all, people, including Catholics, generally do not want to be told how to vote. And so there is a danger of backlash. This is a real danger. I have seen it in operation. Second, when the church speaks about issues, the people can put the rest together. It does not have to be told to them directly.
So, Bishop, we've talked about the things clergy should not do. Next week we'll talk about things that are permitted.
Good.
Thank you, Bishop Gerald and Monsignor Green. So please join us next week on this station as we tell the people about the Diocese of Lafayette and the good news of our Catholic faith.